The town square was hot already as the people came together, humming like flies over dead flesh. At the center lay a wooden platform, weathered from decades of commerce. On top of it was a tiny basket. In it, wrapped in frayed cloth, was a baby. 6 months old at most, skin as black as good earth, limbs writhing in sunlight. The auctioneer's voice cut through morning air. "What'll I get for this little firecracker? Good field hand in 10 years. Do I hear $20? Hands went up like vultures swooping down on a carcass. Men bid without shame, their voices biting and careless, as if they were buying an animal. Some women in the crowd covered their faces, sickened by the spectacle. But the men continued to bid, their voices loud and eager. On the edge of the crowd sat Silas Garrett on horseback, his face carved in stone. At 45, he was the most successful rancher for 3 counties in any direction, and the loneliest. 5 winters ago, a fever had stolen his wife and daughter, and since then, he had spoken only when business required it. His hands, once tender with family, had hardened like his heart. The auctioneer spotted him. "Mr. Garrett," he called, "surely you'll place a bid on this fine specimen? $35 is the current offer." The crowd turned as one. This was routine. The powerful always claimed the most vulnerable. Silas Garrett always bought the strongest laborers, and paid well for them. But Silas didn't stir. His eyes were on the baby, and for an instant, something unsaid flashed across his features. A memory, a loss, pain beyond words. The baby's wail cut through the quiet like a knife. "No," Silas said, his voice firm and clear. "I won't bid." Gasps ran through the crowd. The auctioneer paused in mid-sentence. Men who had known Silas for years stared at each other, amazed. The wealthiest man in the area had just rejected a simple acquisition. "But Mr. Garrett," the auctioneer stuttered, "surely you must—" "I said no," Silas repeated, wheeling his horse. "Find someone else." He rode off without saying another word, the wails of the baby hanging behind him like smoke. Whispers followed him across the dust, weak. Some called him. Others said that mourning had broken his mind for good. But hidden in the shadows, a woman in a tattered blue dress watched him ride away. Her name was Dina Ross, and she had been waiting an awful long time for this moment. Silas didn't glance back. He had no idea his straightforward denial had triggered something potent. Something that would lead 50 individuals to stand outside his gate before dawn. Something that would collapse the barriers he'd constructed in his life, or break him into a million pieces. Back on the ranch, quiet enveloped him like an old robe. His land lay broad and barren, a kingdom unto himself. The house was vacant, untouched by laughter or happiness for years. The quiet was his penance for having survived, for not saving those he loved. But as he dismounted, something caught his attention. Recent hoofprints in the dust. Dozens of them. They encircled his property like wolves searching for prey. His heart stopped. He took his rifle and tracked. The tracks went to elevated points, areas that provided a panoramic view of his home. Whoever had come through was familiar with the land, familiar with him. As dusk fell, movement began in the line of trees. One horseman, then a second, then many. Horses and riders watching, fearless, observing him openly. Then out of the darkness rode the woman in the blue dress. Dina Ross. She rode with gentle rage, her eyes glued to his. She stopped just short of rifle distance and called out across the gap. "Silas Garrett, we need to talk." "Off my land," he bellowed back, lifting his rifle. "Whatever it is you're looking for, you won't find it here." Dina didn't blink. "You know very well what we're looking for," she said. "The same thing you wanted when you left that baby this morning. The same thing that's been consuming you since your family passed away." The words struck Silas like a blow to the chest. How could this stranger know about the scars he hid beneath silence and solitude? "You don't know me," he said, voice lower now. "I know you're the only man in that square who saw a baby. Not a product," she said. "I know you're the only one who remembered what it means to be human." Darkness fell. More riders emerged from the woods. 10, 20. 30. All ex-slaves. All quiet. All regarding Silas not with anger, but with something else. Hope. Fatigued, perilous hope. By dawn, it's all different, Dina shouted. You can meet it alone, or with us. But this doesn't stop until that baby's safe. Then, suddenly, they dispersed into the darkness. Alone again, Silas paced his vacant home like a trapped animal. He stocked rifles and set them by every window, but the true fight wasn't outside. It was within him. Dina's words haunted him. How did she know? The cry of the baby had pierced him more than he anticipated, unwinding memories of his daughter's final days. Her small hand wrapped around his, her ravaged breathing with fever, the powerlessness that shattered him. That hurt had petrified him. He had vowed never to be hurt again. But sorrow had boundaries, and something within him was shattering. As sunrise colored the valley with gold, Silas ascended to his rooftop. What he witnessed caused his blood to freeze. They hadn't been lying. From all sides they rode, on horses silent and determined. 50 of them. And at their forefront rode Dina Ross, not bearing arms, but equipment. Shovels, ropes, materials. They encircled his home in a wide semicircle. A formation not for battle, but something even more perilous. Unity. Dina Ross got down from her horse and walked alone, her arms up and empty in a peaceful sign. Her voice carried toward the rooftop where Silas stood with rifle at the ready. Mr. Garrett, we didn't come to fight. We came to give you something nobody's given you in 5 years. Silas's eyes were cold. And what's that? A chance? Dina explained. To save a life, rather than watch one slip away. The words cut deep. 50 faces surrounded him who had lost children, parents, and spouses. Grief marked on every line of their faces. They had the same wounds Silas had, just in other locations. The square baby, said Dina. He's been sold to Marcus Webb. You know what he is like. He works children until their bodies collapse. That child won't live to his 2nd birthday. Silas felt something break within him. Webb's brutality was common knowledge. He was the sort of man who viewed human agony as merely another entry on a book. By noon, Dina stated, we're going to Webb's ranch to get that baby out. We're inviting you to come. Not for your money, not for your guns, for the sake of that child. Because you know what it means to fight for family. The sun rose higher, battering down as Silas was at a crossroads. One that would determine who he'd be for the duration of his lifetime. He descended from the roof, his boots pounding the ground with finality. These individuals had every right to resent a man such as him. Rich, white, quiet when they were hurting. And yet, here they were. Not to seek revenge, but to beg his assistance. You're going to rob Marcus Webb, Silas said, walking up to Dina. That makes you both outlaws. Makes me one if I join you. We like to call ourselves liberators, she replied, her smile tired. And you became one the moment you said no to that auction. That refusal was a call to war. Silas looked around at the people gathered. Men with whip scars down their backs. Women who'd watched their own babies ripped away. Sons of mothers who never came back. They didn't want a raid. They wanted a reckoning. A reminder of humanity. Webb has 12 armed men, Silas warned. You're talking about a bloodbath. Dina nodded. Perhaps, but that baby dies slowly every day we don't act. And occasionally, Mr. Garrett. A quick death is more compassionate. Silas staggered. He'd made that same calculation once, holding his fevered daughter, unable to save her. That helplessness had ravaged him. There may be an alternative, he exclaimed. Webb is a businessman. He likes money more than men and women. If we can make it more costly to retain the child than to release him, he could fold. Dina inclined her head. What are you thinking? Webb furnishes beef to half this land. He requires my cattle. I inform him I am cutting him off, and his contracts are worthless. He will listen if he believes there is money at stake. And what happens if he simply flees, or calls in the authorities? She inquired. Silas paused. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, compounded with fear. If he took this step, there would be no going back. If he failed, that baby would endure even more for his attempts. If he succeeded, he'd have to feel again, to risk again, to care again. "I know you're afraid," said Dina softly. "We all are. But fear's just love with no place to go. That baby needs someone to stand up for him. Like you want somebody to stand up for your little girl. So now you ask me, if you were Silas, what would you do? Risk everything for a child you barely know? Or shield yourself from loving again?" Leave your response in the comments. Because the decision Silas made next would determine everything. 50 sets of eyes waited. Smoke billowed on the far horizon Webb's ranch, where a child's destiny was being penned. Silas glanced at them, then back at his vacant house behind him. For 5 years, he'd opted for safety over relationship, quietness over hurt. But now, he realized that safety was a slow kind of death. "I'll come," he declared firmly. "But we do this intelligently. No guns unless Webb pushes our hand. We attempt negotiation first." The expression of relief that swept over Dina's face spoke louder than words. These individuals had been willing to die rather than have a child endure another night. Now they had hope for something more. They set out with haste. Silas rode ahead of everyone with Dina. He was alive for the first time in years. The weight of sorrow wasn't erased, but it wasn't his any longer. He bore it with others with intention. "How did you know?" Silas asked as they traveled. "About my daughter? How you stared at that baby," Dina said. "Just the way I stared at my son before they sold him south. 15 years ago. Some pain leaves scars only broken parents can perceive." The words struck Silas with the force of a hammer. She wasn't fighting for strangers. She was fighting for all the children she couldn't rescue. Just as he was. They crested a hill, and there it was, Marcus Webb's ranch. It wasn't a farm. It was a fortress. Men with weapons marched through the fields. Watchtowers stood at every corner. Webb had constructed his empire upon cruelty, and secured it with lead and steel. Sweet Jesus! Someone behind them swore. How are we going to get through that? But Silas had already begun to change. The fear was still present, but so was clarity. He studied the configuration like a general reading a battlefield. "Dina, take half the crew around to the north pasture. Get yourself seen, but don't provoke. Make him believe you're here to stampede the herd. And the others? They come with me. We're going up to his front gate. I want him to know it's me and assume this is business as usual." Murmurs spread through the crew. "Walk into the lion's mouth?" Silas didn't blink. "Webb knows me. He'll listen. If he thinks there's profit in it. I'll get in, I'll find the baby. Determine what we do. And if he simply decides to shoot you dead where you stand?" Dina asked. Silas gave a cold smile. "Then you'll know negotiation's not an option." They divided into halves, half of them walking out in the open, half remaining concealed. Silas rode toward the gate, his jaw clenched, his hands firm. This time he wasn't fleeing. He wasn't cowering. He was opting to engage. The guards knew him instantly. Silas Garrett, Cattle King, invincible. They allowed him to pass without hesitation. In minutes, he stood in Marcus Webb's courtyard, rifle resting behind his back, scanning every crevice. No jerky movements. No flicker of fear. From the house itself came Marcus Webb himself. He appeared to be made of money, lean, smooth, with a smiling face but no soft one. A silk-clad predator. "Well, well," said Webb, holding out a hand. "Silas Garrett. What do I owe this pleasant surprise?" Silas shook his hand, although every fiber of his being urged him not to. "Business, Marcus," he replied curtly. "Always business. I heard you bought something yesterday. A baby." Webb's smile grew. "Ah, the baby. Wise investment. In a decade, he'll be worth 10 times what I paid. Provided he lives." The callousness in Webb's tone made Silas's jaw knot, but he remained calm. He needed to. "That's exactly what I'm here to discuss," Silas said calmly. "I've got an offer." Webb waved toward the house. "Then let's discuss it inside." As he stepped over the threshold, Silas heard it. The soft, fractured wail of a baby reverberating from further inside the house. His heart tightened, yet his face didn't change. "He's alive," Silas repeated to himself. "At least until now." Webb ushered him into a well-furnished study with the scent of control permeating every room. Rich leather, costly ink, and cold mathematics of human existence reduced to spreadsheets. A crystal glass of whiskey stood on the desk, a pistol tied on the rim, and a pile of receipts. Of them, yesterday's bill of sale. "So," Webb said, resting back in his chair like a monarch on a throne, "let's hear this charitable offer." "I need workers for my spring drive," Silas started. "Young ones. Trainable. I'll pay top dollar." Webb sat forward, interested. "And I'll take the baby off your hands, for triple what you paid. In addition, you'll have first choice of my cattle for 5 years at submarket prices." Too good to be true. Webb's smile grew thin with suspicion. "Why that child? There are lots of others." Silas didn't blink. "New stock is easier to train, less bad habits. And I understand he's healthy, in spite of things." Somewhere in the house, the baby's wails rose again. Higher, more frantic. Silas heard the motion, footsteps, muffled voices, the uncaring going on of life around a child in captivity. Webb rose and gazed out the window in the direction of his guards. "You know," he said, "I've heard things about your actions at the auction, about horsemen seen on your property." Silas's heart accelerated. Outside, the assembly was coming together. Ex-slaves, white settlers, Mexican vaqueros, native horsemen. Individuals who'd been pitted against one another for too long, now standing side by side. This was no longer a rescue. It was a movement. Dina held the baby close, tears running down her cheeks. "What's his name?" she whispered. Webb spit blood. "He's property. Property don't get names." "Then we'll give him one," Silas said. He looked into the child's dark eyes and remembered another child. Another life, now long gone. "His name is Samuel." The baby gurgled softly, as if approving. In Dina's arms, he didn't look like property anymore. He looked like hope. As they were about to set off, Silas looked around, at the strangers who had once been a stranger and now felt like something closer to kin. The 50 who had shown up that morning had brought more than a mission. They'd brought him out of the grave. Real strength, he considered, doesn't come from being alone. It comes from deciding to care, even if it hurts. "What now?" Dina asked, mounting her horse. Silas gazed out to the open land, out to the future. "Now we go home," he said. "All of us." The return ride to the ranch was a far cry from the somber ride out. Folks laughed, spoke, swapped food and water. Samuel was passed from rider to rider, each one taking their turn to watch over him like family. By the time they arrived at Silas's ranch, the baby had 50 guardians, and perhaps more in the pipeline. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a warm glow across the ranch, Silas's yard came alive with something it hadn't seen in years. Laughter, life, purpose. Dina gazed down at Samuel and whispered, "He's going to need a family, somebody to raise him, somebody to love him." Silas faced to regard his home. Once empty, now filled with individuals who had restored something he believed was gone for good. "Perhaps," he said, "he does not require one family. Perhaps he requires all of us." And Samuel was the first child of something completely different. Not just a house, not just a rescue, but a community, bonded not by blood, but by mutual defiance. A community that refused to be silent about human beings as property, that took love over fear, connection over silence, action over despair. Dina came to live with Silas to assist in raising the boy. Gradually, one by one, others came, some in search of shelter, some in search of meaning. What was once a ranch of shadows became an asylum, a haven for the broken and the courageous, a refuge where stories could be retold, and where futures no longer needed to be purchased or taken. The loneliest man in the county had opened his door, and in doing so, opened a door for something much greater than himself. Webb had been right about something. They had issued a call to war, against cruelty, against indifference, against every man and every system that benefited from pain. But what Webb didn't realize was this: there are some powers greater than bullets or fear. Human decency, once triggered, is unstoppable. And that was only the beginning. Years later, when Samuel was old enough to ask his parents where he had come from, Silas sat him down and explained the truth. Not merely the facts, no, but the essence of it. He described a wooden platform in the middle of the square, of a mob who viewed a child as cattle, and of one word, no, that turned everything around. He explained to Samuel how 50 individuals once stood at a gate and redefined the future. How one single act of defiance had kindled a fire that blazed through generations of brutality. How family is not necessarily blood. Sometimes it is the individuals who will fight for your future, purely because it is the right thing to do. So if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe my channel.